I finally had to shut down my computer and restart to be able to see you guys. So how does this thing, done this only once or twice, and usually I don't fool with the camera, but I see, how do I see you guys? I see you one at a time, or?
So if you swipe left,
Left?
the grid will come up and you'll see our faces.
Oh, yay!
Oh, I just learned that right now.
Oh, come on with it. Let's go.
8 years old when I learned that. Yeah, okay. So it's different on the phone versus the laptop.
It is.
Are you guys on the phone or on the laptop?
I think just you and Yemi are on the phone and everybody else is on the laptop.
Oh, okay. All right.
And Manju, I just wanted to ask, how do you pronounce your first name? So that
Manju.
Manju. Okay.
Manju.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did I miss anything in the interim here of like trying to log on?
No, we were just trying to help you, trying to figure out how to get you on. We were brainstorming.
Oh, nice, nice. We still have 2 more people coming, right?
Yep, we're waiting for 2 more.
Oh,
which I will text, actually.
Oh, you know what? I need to put my phone on Do Not Disturb.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
How do you do that? How do you do that?
Oh, just Do Not Disturb. Take your video away. Oh, where'd she go?
Oh, I'm doing it right now.
Oh, okay. Does anybody know how to Do Not Disturb on a laptop?
Yes.
Am I back?
Yes, you are back.
If you hit the top right corner, there's like a sidebar. You'll see notifications, maybe.
Oh my,
And then you can, instead of today, where the weather is, you just hit notifications, and then there's like night shift and Do Not Disturb. You can turn Do Not Disturb on there if you see that.
Can you say that one more time, because I don't see it?
Oh snap, I never knew this is how you did that. That's crazy.
It's on the top right?
Right on a laptop. Are you on a laptop?
Oh, no, I'm not on a laptop.
Okay. Do you have your phone? You can do that by going to your control center, which is either swiping up from the bottom or swiping down from the top right corner.
Swiping down from the
where
right.
You turn your brightness up and down.
Yeah, yeah. And then
the moon icon is Do Not Disturb.
The moon icon.
Hey. Hi.
The moon icon.
Lisa.
Where's the moon icon?
Okay, are we ready to let attendees come in or not yet?
Woo! Yay, I got it.
Let's wait till Lisa connects.
Okay, great.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay. I know you just came from your workflow and trying to transition.
I literally just finished planting a bunch of 24 bags of white oyster mushrooms that were magically appeared in front of me from a white man.
Yes.
Wow. Nice.
And then I was working at Brooklyn Grange harvesting stuff for market this weekend. So literally I just got in. I'm sorry that I'm
Come
late.
on. It's the perfect segue into this conversation of agriculture. You eat, sleep, and breathe it. I love it.
Lisa, we cannot see you.
Oh. Emily, can you see how many people are in the waiting room?
I don't see a waiting room from where I am right now.
Oh, there's no waiting room? Oh, okay.
I don't think so. I think I have to hit broadcast, or do you see the bar to hit broadcast? It's like an image.
Go ahead and hit broadcast. It looks like it's red for me. Does that mean it's broadcasting or not?
Can you all hear me?
Oh,
Hi, Lisa.
Oh, hey, Lisa.
Can you hear me? Yes, but you're muffled.
You're a little muffled. Can you talk from the left?
There is Lisa.
You can see me or you can't hear me or see me?
So we hear you, but you're muffled, and we see you, but you're frozen.
Getting there, almost.
Let's see.
And I don't know if headphones might help with audio for since you're on the phone. Not sure.
Hey, go ahead. You can start broadcasting.
I don't think I do anything about it.
Lisa? I wonder.
Is it better?
Yes. Say something.
Oh, okay, here we go. I can see myself.
Okay.
Cool.
We're all set, y'all?
Yeah.
So, are we broadcasting? Should I start?
Ooh,
No, wait, you can start it.
Okay. I can't see everyone's faces, like the audience. So, hello, and welcome to What the Fuck is Going On with Agriculture. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today. We have an exciting discussion for you. We want to first start off by thanking FiberShed for lending us the platform to host this webinar today. So thank you so much, FiberShed. We usually start our events by taking a collective breath to center ourselves and to open our minds to different pathways to healing. So if you don't mind, I'd like to invite all of you to join us in taking a collective deep breath, an inhale for 3 seconds and an exhale for 3 seconds. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. So my name is Whitney McGuire, and I am an attorney. I'm also co-founder of Sustainable Brooklyn with Dominique Drakeford, who will be moderating today's discussion. So Sustainable Brooklyn intentionally works to amplify the humanity and value of, excuse me, people of color, BIPOC, experiences and intellectual future sustainability of all life and our planet. What this means is we work to we bridge the gaps between the sustainability movement and targeted communities. What this also means is that we work to prevent the whitewashing of a movement for a sustainable future that conveniently bypasses the lived experiences of those who've been exploited the most, culturally, generationally. What this also means is the elimination of daily crises for BIPOC that have gone undetected, unobserved, and unmitigated by majority white stakeholders in sustainability solution-making spaces across industries worldwide. That means for us in the future, there are no Flints, there are no Katrinas, Marias, Rana Plazas, Fergusons, and incomprehensibly so many more. Our focus is fashion, agriculture, and wellness because our lives intersect with these industries consistently. Both Dominique and I are 2 Black women in our 30s from socioeconomic foundations. And regardless of our different backgrounds, our urges for regenerative, sustainable present and futures are the same. We created our organization as a means to offer non-traditional education and re-education in regenerative sustainable literacy, which centers on the lived experiences of BIPOC. We host accessible Brooklyn community-based symposia, workshops, panel discussions, keynote talks, and develop programming for youth. And we also engage stakeholders in sustainability to amplify or redirect their sustainability efforts towards regenerative inclusivity, which means engaging these stakeholders and BIPOC beyond the optics of representation and beyond being on the right side of history. This is the way that we directly create sustainable solutions. So I want to, before we segue into the panel discussion, I want to read a page from Farming While Black. This is Leah Pinkman's book. It's Soul Fire Farm's Practical Guide to Liberation on the Land. And in it, Leah says that racism is built into the DNA of the U.S. food system, beginning with the genocidal land theft from indigenous people, continuing with the kidnapping of our ancestors from the shores of West Africa for forced agricultural labor, morphing into convict leasing, expanding to the migrant guest worker program, and nurturing into its current state, where farm management is among the whitest professions, farm labor is predominantly brown and exploited, and people of color disproportionately live in food apartheid neighborhoods and suffer from diet-related illness. This system is built on stolen land and stolen labor and needs a redesign. So we're here to discuss that redesign. And before we get into the panel, I want to direct your attention to 2 ways to support Sustainable Brooklyn in our work. We have developed this initiative with no outside funding and very little personal funding. And everything that we present, we try to make it as accessible as possible. So please consider donating to Sustainable Brooklyn. We also have a COVID-19 fund for families who are impacted drastically by COVID-19. You can find all of that on our website, sustainablebk.co. Thank you so much, y'all, and I'll hand it over to Dom.
Dominique, sound isn't on.
Yes, way to get started. How's everybody doing? I hope you guys are feeling uplifted by the fact that we're going to have such an impactful, interesting, and engaging conversation. I'm excited to be here. I would like to first have our 5 panelists introduce themselves. We will start with Manju.
Okay.
Introduction.
All right. I'm excited to be here. I'm super, super excited at the response that we have gotten on agriculture. And my name is Manju Kumar. My family, we run a business called Brush with Bamboo, which offers sustainable plastic-free products, mostly in oral care. And I have been obsessed with urban agriculture for a very, very long time. I think it's just been running through my blood, but I have a feeling it's running through all of our bloods and we haven't reconnected to it. But the urge to be on land and on farm is very strong. My younger son and me, we started a nonprofit called Sarvodaya Institute. Translated, it means upliftment of all, or rising together. And we've seen on a first-hand basis how much we can impact and change, just on the small scale. For me, it was the hardest thing to imagine healing the earth. I didn't think it was possible, but then we've done it on our urban landscape. We have 5,000 square feet. We live in Los Angeles. We have 87 trees on 5,000 square feet. So it's an edible food forest. We got away from the regular model of a yard with grass and bushes that don't feed anything. So I'm an avid lover of earth, and I'm an avid lover of living simply and keeping it real and keeping it down to the basics. So, cooking, cleaning dishes, like there's no facades here.
Thank you. And your backyard urban farm is literally so majestic. I'm in awe every time I'm watching your stories. Okay, next, Rebecca.
Oh, there we go. Unmuted. All right, nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. My name's Rebecca Burgess. I'm the director of Fibershed and founder. And my work in light of agriculture, I have farmed multiple pieces of land personally with groups of children and adults too, but our connection has been primarily trying to re-explore color through plant material and connecting us back to our roots of where color once came from before it was fossil carbon derived, and the intersection between color and medicine plants, color and food plants, and how to really create a material culture from the landscape, all of which has been kind of in some ways erased from modern fashion, the idea that we can really source these beautiful rainbow colors from the earth. In my professional work, we work with 195, my other professional work, other than on the farm, would be, we work with 195 small and large scale farms, small manufacturers, makers who are maybe felt or knit or weave or cut and sew, and they metabolize the materials from these farms, and they create material culture from a geographically tight little spot we call a fiber shed, analogous to a watershed, analogous to a food shed. And we're in north central California, just north of Manju.
You're muted again.
Oh, sorry, I should have said something.
I'm gonna get the hang of it, y'all. Bear with me. But yeah, Rebecca has an amazing book called Fibershed, Growing a Movement of Farmers, Fashion Activists, and Makers for a New Textile Economy, and it's fucking phenomenal. So everybody check that out. Yep, shameless plug. I know that's right. Next we have Lisa.
You guys, unmute yourselves before you speak.
I know. We getting there.
You're still muted, Lisa.
Yeah?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Wonderful. Okay. So I'm Lisa Betty. I am a PhD candidate at Fordham, and I'm in hopefully my last year of this program. My work in academia is around labor, enslaved and indigenous, enslaved Black and enslaved indigenous labor, as well as migration, forced migration, voluntary migration, just migration patterns, and then immigration law and also migration law. So looking at forced migration laws that are connected to that. Trail of Tears would be an example of that. I teach all of those things at Fordham at the moment, but I've always, people say, what do you want to do your PhD? And I'm like, be a farmer. I'm doing this as a logistics if I need, just so that I got all my feet in all these different pots. I know how to do different things. I know how to talk to different people. I can be anywhere. But my grandma was a farmer. My mom was a farmer. My great grandmother was a farmer. But they also were different things. So I was always taught to, if you're a farmer, you also have to be a teacher, a nurse, a midwife, a medicine woman, obia woman, whatever you need to be, you have to be all those things at the same time. So I'm giving myself grace and time to learn everything I need to learn. Right now I'm finishing the PhD, but farming is always a part of my life. I did train with Leah Penniman at Soulfire Farm. I got to do their training. They have an intensive, I think it was a 10-day training in upstate New York. So I got a lot of really good community experience, and then seeing what Leah created and seeing the ways that I would like to recreate those things in the Caribbean is basically my goal, Caribbean or in West Africa. So, that's where I'm at in this space, and I hope to contribute a kind of socio-historical perspective to some of the things that we're talking about, because it's very much sovereignty is rooted in particularly in the United States and in the Western Hemisphere. Sovereignty is rooted in food sovereignty and small aspects of land sovereignty. You know, they don't even know you have land sovereignty, but you have a little patch that you have cassava growing. They don't know it, but you got a 5x5 patch. Those small things were important to us in the Western Hemisphere. So I hope to just bring that notion of sovereignty, whether it's having an actual piece of paper that has, you know, as a land decree, or if it's something that you know that 5x5 plot is yours and they don't know that yucca's growing there, but you do. That's also a sovereignty that I would like to, you know, explain and explore during this session.
Thank you. So lucky to have a historian and educator on this panel amongst farmers. So thank you, Lisa. Can we have Yemi go next?
Oh yeah, I'm muted. Hi everyone. I'm so honored to be on the panel with you ladies. You all are so incredible. Thanks to Whitney and Tamm for putting this together as well. My name is Yemi Amu. I'm a farmer in New York City. I have a farm in Bushwick. My organization is called Oko Farms. And I'm a different type of farmer because I grow in water. I do aquaponics, which is an ecosystem where you're raising fish and plants together. And my background was as a nutrition educator and culinary educator, and I transitioned to farming because I felt like there was a huge disconnect in people's relationship to food because they did not understand where food is coming from. And my original intention was just to engage my clients, adult clients, and children that I worked with just the act of putting a seed in the ground and seeing what happens to help transform their relationship with food. So I started doing soil farming, and then I discovered aquaponics along the way, and water use in farming just became something that I don't passionate about. I mean, I'm African. I was born and raised in Nigeria. We didn't always have water. So there is this relationship with water and not always having access to water that has stuck with me my entire life. So a form of agriculture that is very water conscious and is about raising food in an environment where you're recycling water and you're not just raising plants, saving water while you're raising plants, but also recycling fish waste to grow food. So you're looking at not just conserving water, but also recycling waste and reducing waste. And it just made sense to me. And my farm in Bushwick not just grows food, but we really are steeped in education. I just think it's impossible to be an urban farmer and not also be an educator. I think that is our primary role, is to be educators, is to show people the connections between themselves and nature. We're so disconnected in the city, and without green spaces, we don't see ourselves as part of nature. And farming really shows you that you are nature. You know, in the sustainability movement, the language is very disconnected, where we are saving nature. We're not saving nature, we're saving ourselves. We're nature, you know. We're not like these overlords that are like, you know, controlling and saving and protecting. No, like, you know, we're saving ourselves. We're nurturing our souls, our bodies, our minds, and our spirit. So ultimately, that is what I try to convey with my work. Even though aquaponics is the route through which I'm doing it, it's still about food production, ecosystem diversity, and really showing human beings the connections between themselves, water, and aquatic life, because there is a connection between us and water and aquatic life that we don't often see, or we don't see at all most of the time, and especially when you are in an urban environment. So yeah, I'm a teacher first, and then I say I'm a student, and then a teacher, and then a farmer. That's how I I would put it.
Thank you, Yemi, one of the most prolific educators in this space with regards to ecosystems. I love it. And last but not least, Amber.
I'm so honored to be here, and I'm so honored to speak after Yemi. I love and adore her from afar. I'm Amber Tamm. I'm from Brooklyn, and when I say that, I really, really mean that. My family has been here for 4 generations now in East New York, living deeply within food apartheid and not understanding food with no recollection of Southern culture. I'm a farmer, horticulturalist, and floral designer. I want to give a disclaimer that farmer does not always equate to owning land. So when I say I'm a farmer, that does not mean I own a farm. I'm a farmer that moves through other people's farms until I get my land access and the correct funding to start my own thing. But I identify as farmer first. Horticulture and floral design kind of comes for supplementary income and creativity practices. In recent times, Instagram community has called me a farm activist, an advocate for public land use, a earth steward, all of these names, but I allow Instagram community and brown communities to call me with whatever they want to call me, honestly. I'm also a really big practitioner and enforcer of regenerative agriculture, and I mean that outside of the term itself, outside of technique, but also just wanting to enter into the cultural topic of agriculture and talking about what that reimagining looks like. Very quickly, I got into farming through losing my parents. My father murdered my mom, and my father was indeed a New York City police officer, which was part of the reason that happened, and I want to emphasize that. And I needed food, I needed income, and I needed housing, and farming sealed the deal for me for all those things. And eventually, once I started farming, I saw that I put my mom in the earth, and as her bones are composting, she's becoming Mother Earth. So that's my own personal ethos.
Thank you, Amber, for that introduction. A soul that's near and dear to my heart. First of all, thank you, ladies, for being here. Some of the most prolific and profound and beautiful introductions I've ever heard in my life on any panel. But we will jump right into it. So our last panel discussion, what the fuck is up with fashion, sort of talked about the corrupt systems within the supply chain. And I think that many people forget that the inherent genesis of the fashion industry is based in farming. So to tie what we talked about in the fashion space and bring it to agriculture and food, I'd like to ask Rebecca, who hones in on farming and fiber, what do you see as the deficiencies in the farming industry, just looking at the gaps of regional infrastructure from your vantage point as a, as you're working with FiberShed?
Thank you. That is a good question. Well, one thing that's a deficiency is the way that the economy has pushed all land stewards, actually even those who own the land and those who lease it even more so, to push the land through chemistry and mechanical processes. Right now in the United States, we're spending more every year on synthetic inputs than we are human labor to produce our fiber, to produce our food. That's Haber-Bosch produced synthetic nitrogen that is tied to the marine dead zones, to the nitrates in the groundwater that create carcinogenic aquifer sources for water. And then we have all of the herbicide and pesticide pressure that comes through that huge amount of money that really I call agribusiness. What the fuck is the matter with agriculture is like, what the fuck is the matter with agribusiness? The businesses that produce the machinery and produce the chemistry are profiteering while farmer income is plummeting, yet yields are going up. So you have people becoming more productive in terms of what they're producing in the cotton fields, in the wheat fields, And the people on the land are going under financially, but the people making the money are selling tractors and they're selling chemistry. So that's a major, kind of meta level problem. And then the decentralization, or the piece that we push for at Fibershed, is if we talk about sovereignty and what we have access to in the fashion system, 70% of what we wear is, from fossil carbon. It's polyester, it's acrylic, it's plastic. 30% of what we wear, might be around some kind of natural fiber. Most of that's cotton. 94% of that cotton in the US is genetically engineered to withstand the use of 2,4-D, Roundup, whatever chemical cocktail is associated with that seed that can resist that chemical cocktail through its genetic engineering. So what I see is that the cotton gins, the spinning facilities, the carding facilities, those facilities, there's a new mill going into Louisiana right now. And when we talked to this mill, I was like, great, you're decentralizing. Louisiana's going to have this new denim mill. And I said, well, what kind of cotton do you work with? And they were like, E3. And I'm like, well, who produces that? They're like, Bayer. And I'm like, so we can't even get organic cotton through this new mill because you're so tied to Bayer? And they were like, well, we could talk about it. But it's basically like infrastructure, grain mills, gins, all of the infrastructure to help a farmer move to the marketplace are often places where you can't get that mill or that piece of equipment under kind of an organic certification. Not that we need certifications, but just a place where you can even process a non-GMO product is really hard to come by. That's a problem. And then what I love out of the equipment that Gandhi developed in India, the Eat Sharka, the way you could hand spin cotton. So there's some modern engineers that developed something called the micro spin, and you could grow at a village level in India. You could take about 1,000 acres of land, and they have a place where you could gin, you can produce sliver, you can spin, you can weave on this small scale equipment called micro spin. And you could buy that equipment for like a couple $100,000 compared to a mill. We wanted to build a mill for organic cotton farmers. It's like $700 million. So part of the problem is to help farmers who don't want to grow the genetically engineered stuff. They need access to equipment that won't be contaminated. And that equipment is so expensive. And so we're really fighting for appropriate, decentralized, efficient, small-scale technologies that you can pair with the regenerative agriculture model. Because otherwise, you could produce all this stuff, but how are you going to get it to market if you don't have those supports and those systems of infrastructure consolidated by corporatocracies that don't even want to let you in if you're not growing the right seed? So that's a problem. Anyway.
Yeah, no.
We're focused on the WTF. So there you go.
Right. No, that was a huge what the fuck, because I don't hear enough people discussing, chemicals and business infrastructure with regards to agriculture. And I'm definitely going to ask Yemi a very similar question. Yemi, I know you're born and raised in Nigeria, and you literally had a plot of land back home with chickens as part of your education, and you came here to the States and you've studied everything from nutrition education to owning your own bomb-ass aquaponic farm. What do you see as the biggest challenges in the agricultural system from your vantage point?
Oh, hey, I'm gonna speak as someone who lives and works in the city, and just echo what Amber said about, being a farmer who doesn't own land. I think one of the biggest issues in cities is just land access. It is so difficult to have people in communities of color that are facing food apartheid to eat healthily or to have access to good food without making land accessible to folks to grow food. I think that's one of the biggest issues we have. We have so many people who go through farm school and all these like farm training programs, and then they come out and what happens? So you have this wealth of resources, people who are knowledgeable and talented and passionate, and there's no land for them to work on. And most of them move outside of the city to grow food. And then we're left with, you know, people living in the city without food access. And in 2020, we're dealing with COVID and our communities are devastated. Our community is completely devastated because we don't have the access to healthcare. We don't have the access to good food. We don't have the knowledge within our communities to be able to grow food for ourselves. And there's no structure in place to make that happen. So I think for me, that's like the biggest thing. We can't talk about access to good food and health without also talking about land. There are 596 acres of empty lots right now in New York City, right? And they're sitting empty for what?
What's that number again, Yemi?
596 acres. 596. And there's a website.
Come on with it.
I think it's called 596acres.com, right? Mm-hmm. Sitting empty. Because what? For what reason? And it's like, it's jumping hoops to get access to land. Those who do have access to land through the Parks Department, through Green Thumb, I'm calling them out, also have to deal with all kinds of restrictions. People have land being snatched from under them constantly, right? So there's a whole infrastructure system that constantly puts us as a deficit. And, you know, I have so many young people that come to my farm and say, hey, I want to be a farmer. I want to be a farmer. How can I do this? And I'm always like, well, how can you do this? How can you do this? Where is the infrastructure? Where's the land? Where's the support system? How do you get started? Where's the money? When they're like, you know, people doing these fancy growing systems indoors and on rooftops and are raising millions of dollars to do it through venture capitalists. How does, you know, a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old, 30-year-old person of color from East New York, I live in Ocean Hill. How do you actually set out to become a farmer in New York City? What infrastructure is in place for you to do this? It's impossible. And how do you serve your community? Because you've gone through the work of getting the knowledge, and how do you put that knowledge to serve your community? There's no infrastructure in place. You know, me doing it is not enough. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just not enough. There needs to be more people that can do it. I don't even know how I'm able to do it, honestly. You know, it shouldn't be by chance. It shouldn't be by accident. It shouldn't be people working for nonprofits for barely anything per hour on a seasonal basis and having no life, you know, and working their bodies to death. You know, there are just so many, we don't talk about that enough, how most of this urban farming jobs are, you know, really indentured servitude for most of it, because you're working with no health care, you're working long, hard hours, you're barely getting paid. You know, there's that system. And then there's the other level where you have folks from, you know, higher socioeconomic levels that are willing to do that work for cheap. They're willing to do that work for nothing because mommy and daddy can pay the bills. And then it's making it even more difficult for those of us who want to do this for a living and need to be able to make a good living, not able to do that. So there's just so many things in the infrastructure that makes it difficult. So I feel all the time that like I'm working in a vacuum or even speaking in a vacuum. You know, one of the things that I try to do is show people how they can do little things for themselves at home, you know, so that you can support yourself either as an individual or family, because there is no infrastructure in place to do it on a citywide level or community-wide levels. You know, people are trying and doing their best, but you're doing it also knowing that land can be snatched from you at any moment. It's stressful.
I 1000% agree. And I feel like what I'm hearing is toxic infrastructure, toxic business models, and toxic systems. And this is why I'm excited to pivot to Lisa as a historian who has so much in-depth knowledge of systems theory to provide a skeleton for what's happening, because we're not always provided the context of what's happening in agricultural spaces. So to be able to understand more of the root of the issue is extremely important as we begin to gel solutions. So Lisa, I'd love to learn more about just a historical overview of agriculture based on inequalities and how it's manifested in today's systems.
Oh, I can unmute myself.
Come on, scholar.
So, you know, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it all starts with slavery. I think I said that the last. Just even the inequalities that we see, if we think of the first small farmer, at least when we think about it in the Americana context, the yeoman, that's say what Abraham Lincoln was. They were against this slavetocracy, which we know as kind of our current system. Our current capitalist labor system is based on slavery. So there's always people at the fringes, whether it be, I mean, the yeoman is the kind of best example because they didn't necessarily use enslaved labor, and they were always against the slavetocracy. They're mostly white men, but at the end of the day, that gives us a good sense of that this is not just an issue within people of color. This is an issue of a small megamaniacal group of course, white men that are multinational, empire building, imperialistic, you know, technocrats that want to take over the world. And they've been doing it through agriculture for a long time. So the institution of slavery was practiced. And those, you know, those practices, even if it's, I always say this, empire and slavery is very lazy, but they're persistent. So they will persistently transform these types of systems so that they can be, you know, reinvented or you know, remonetized or however, you know, at any point in time in history. And even at our current stage. What I'm interested in, what my work does, is the ways that we have, particularly the most marginalized, the yeomen were not the most marginalized, of course, the enslaved people or even free people, general free people of color, Afro-Indigenous people were the most marginalized, at least in the Western Hemisphere when it comes onto those systems in the 1800s. But looking at the ways that we protested, resisted as enslaved people to these large systems. So you have the plantation system, but then what were we doing outside of the plantation system that allowed us to survive and even thrive? So me looking at those, just these fringe systems, these fringe economies that we created and how they thrive. One thing that, you know, I learned, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, in the United States, Canada, throughout Latin America, Central America, Caribbean, are provision grounds in which enslaved people had title to land. So it doesn't, it sounds crazy, but enslaved people were able to negotiate title to land, or at least use of land usage, so that they could create sustainable economies and sustainable food sources, and even, you know, maybe at least a small plot of cotton where they would create clothes for themselves and mill it themselves and do their certain things themselves in very traditional ways. So what are these fringe economies that we can, and fringe enterprises and fringe ways of thriving and surviving that we can look at and we can replicate? Because of course, the plantation economy is what we're living now. They don't want to say it's the plantation economy, but it's based on the plantation economy. But outside of that, we've created these fringe economies. People of color, that's the thing, you have to follow Black people. What did Black people do? And then you learn, oh, that's how you survive. Because we shouldn't be here. We really shouldn't. The system was not made for us to even live. We had to negotiate terms of labor, and those terms were, I need land usage, and I need rights to food sovereignty, and I need rights I need Sundays off, I need rights to own a few chickens. Those small things created these fringe circumstances in which we were able to survive and thrive. So that's what I look at. So what's at the fringe? Cooperative economics, that's what we were doing. Communalism, that's what we were doing. So looking at that and then moving that forward, And we kept on doing it throughout history with co-op through Fannie Lou Hamer and new communities and with Sherrod and places like that. You see that within our history. And then also, a part of that history is and we're seeing it now, that if we aren't getting what we need and we aren't getting what we want, and this is what my family did, Morant Bay Rebellion, because there was an issue with land and food sovereignty. We had some in 1865, and they took it away, like they took away from the Sea Islands in the U.S. after slavery. The same time they took Sea Islands away, as Sherman number 15 Act, they took our land away. And so we burned it down. We burned down the courthouse. We burned down the police station. We burned everything down. Retribution, was not good. 1,000 of us died, but at the same time, we're not getting what we need. Use of force is necessary. Protest is necessary as well. So that's a part of it, creating these fringe economies, divesting in the plantation economy, capitalist economy, agro industries, large agribusiness, divesting from those, because those are the root of plantation economies, and investing in fringe economies. In the U.S., we know those fringe economies are based on what a lot of Black people had to create to survive enslavement.
Thank you, Lisa. And again, I hate to dig into our wounds and these pain points, but it's so important for us to really understand what the fuck is actually happening right now. Funny, what the fuck is up with agriculture? That was not intentional. But I understand that just looking at this from a plantation economy perspective and understanding that so much of our experiences, especially as Black and Brown Indigenous folks, are tied to trauma, right? It's our relationship with the land is very complex. And a harsh reality is that a lot of people have been introduced to agricultural systems through some form of trauma, whether it's, food insecurity or lack of nutrient-dense options as a gateway to health and wellness or lack thereof, and that being a gateway to the pharmaceutical complex. And so, Amber, I'd love for you to further explain the connections between trauma, land, and food. And it could be from a personal vantage point, a community vantage point, what's happening with COVID, whatever your spirit allows. But I think the intersections of trauma, land, and food need to be very clearly articulated.
So I really want to backtrack to everything that Yemi was saying. I mean, that is my reality. Everything that Yemi has explained is my reality, which is why I emphasize that I'm a farmer first, but I do horticultural, floral arrangements, and pastry chef work, because I am one of those urban farmers in New York City who is dedicated to trying to work for food sovereignty, but I have worked myself to death for agricultural nonprofits, trying to fit everything into 40 hours a week, which isn't possible for farmers. Experienced tremendous amount of burnout. Like everything that Yemi said, that is my lived experience. So that, I just want to speak to that pain. I also think I want to speak to what Lisa said, the pain of slavery. So the land itself is already traumatized. The land itself is already holding the bones and the blood of murdered and abused Indigenous and Black people. So that's a whole realm of its own. I think my coordinates within the ag, farming, earth stewardship, environmental realm is that my personal story kind of encapsulates all of the trauma of all of those things. And that being just first growing up in East New York, where, my family used to own a whole block, and then as time went on, it became one building. And growing up in East New York, where, I was off of Sutter in Vermont. So around the corner, there's a Chinese food. A couple of blocks down, there's, Crown Fried Chicken. And then at the end of the block, there's Miss Maxwell's Bakery, where my whole family worked doing pastry. So growing up, I had no context of anything green. I didn't know that a chicken that walks creates eggs. I didn't know the chicken that walks is the chicken cutlet on my plate. I had no context until I entered a white environment. I had a safety transfer in elementary school, and I went to a school in Greenwich Village. And that's where people were explaining food to me. That's where my peers knew about spinach and kale and etc. So just that being my upbringing was wild. That was a wild experience for me. I think, once again, I want to emphasize that my dad was a New York City police officer, undercover transit for 20 years, and a Black man. So a Black man arresting his own people to feed his own people allowed us to live in projects across the city because they need a certain amount of off-duty cops living in public housing. So I've always lived in the projects across the city because my dad was a New York City police officer. And then that resulting in that racist system, resulting in him putting 7 bullets in my mother. Like, it just left me baffled because from the beginning of time, we were starving, we were pained, we were traumatized. That's what I grew up seeing. But then for me to become an adult and have to experience that on an adult level where I now have to take care of myself, that's where farming came in for me. So really my whole existence is bringing, for ancestry's sake, bringing it all back to land, which is something for many generations in my lineage people have not done. Because as you can see with my dad, there's an emphasis that you need to provide for your family. And that's why Black men go into positions like military or the police academy, because you need to secure healthcare for your people. You need to secure funds for your people. There's not a want to do that. My dad wanted to be a musician, but look how his liberty ended up. He ended up taking all of that anger on the wrong person and destroying their family. So I wanted to be a farmer when I was a little girl, but because I had never heard anybody talk about it, and because anytime I have heard someone talk about it, they were white, I thought it wasn't a space that would welcome me. And so finally, when I was in these crossroads of not having parents, not having grandparents, not having great-grandparents, and not having aunties and uncles to support me, I took it as an opportunity and a very strange privilege to do exactly what I want. And that was farming. And I had no intention that it would work or that I would like it, but I knew I needed to try it. And like I said, from there on, I realized that that's the best way for me to communicate with my mom, is if I believe and I know, and there's science that proves this, not that science is all the facts, but if I am to think that trees communicate with each other through their roots to send, whatever the next tree needs, then I am firm in knowing that when I touch a soil in any part of the planet, that I can communicate with my mom, that I can communicate with my ancestors, and I can honor the ancestors whose land that I'm on. So I think inherently Black people, and that's the only people I can speak for right now, because that's where I'm from, that's what I've seen, that's what I've experienced. But Black people, it's already encoded in us that when we get to land, we're dealing with trauma. It doesn't matter what kind of trauma it is. When you get to land, when you get to soil, when you get to working with plants, it's dealing with trauma. And it's unfortunate because that steals some of the joy from it. But that's us working through the trauma. But the beauty that we have is to be able to say, by me working through my trauma with the land, I'm able to produce nourishment for my community. And that is sovereign for us. No white farmer that I've encountered.
No, seriously. That part.
No white farmer that I've encountered. I farmed across the US 2.5 years. No white farmer that I've encountered could claim that. And that is what we claim, is that while we're working through our trauma, personal, ancestral, communal, we are producing nourishment. And that's the beauty. It's hard as hell. And like Yemi said, you overwork yourself for these people. But in the end, for me, it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was powerful. And our connection with land at this point is in a space of resistance, fighting systems, trying to fight our internal oppression and trauma, but also healing, using the land as a mechanism for spiritual healing by growing food for our family. And I think transitioning to a conversation about connection with the land and how much abundance it creates. Manju, as an organic farmer based in LA, you talk a lot about land-based connection and circularity. And And I remember I was on a live with, or I wasn't on the live with you, I was watching your live, and you were talking about land balance and how land needs to be allocated for food, but also habitat. So I'd like for you to explain better this idea of land balance as we start to discuss what the future of agriculture looks like.
First of all, I really want to thank everybody that's been talking, because you know, I only have my own perspective, and I know, you know, what I can do at an urban level. Like if you are living in the suburbs, I know what the possibilities are of healing that can happen in the suburbs. But it's been very interesting to hear Amber and Yemi talk, because they're in the cities, and access to land is, you know, a big issue. For us, you know, yeah, when we first started to farm, it was, again, you know, we had 5,000 square feet of grass, and I had no trees. I mean, this was basically a suburb that was created by destroying ecosystems. So basically, they took mountains and they cut them down. So there's no topsoil, there's no trees, and the soil is as hard as cement. And on this, they created the suburb, you know, and everybody had a lot of land, but there was no topsoil. It was hard. You couldn't even dig, not even with a pickaxe. You couldn't break even 1/4 down into the soil. It was that hard. So it was a really, really challenging farming project, you know, that we took on. But I don't know why. I think, you know, I just kind of knew that I needed to feed the soil, and we, at that point, were not very well off. We were challenged with financial financial budget. So I used to look for, I don't know why, I had no education, but I used to look for free resources. I, you know, would look at I would envy, you know, like anytime the grasses were being cut down, I would like want to go get access to the grasses. Or if I'd see any kind of tree trimmers trimming around the block, I would like go and talk to them and, hey, can you bring me some of your tree trimmings? So I've been working on healing the soil for, so my son is 35 now, my older son, and we moved here. It's about 33 years. So for 33 years, we've been working on the soil. I've seen how much, when we give back to the soil, how quickly it returns and it starts to give back. And during the process of feeding the soil and planting things, I started to see how birds were returning, insects were returning. You know, life just was finding its way to this tiny little oasis, and it's only 5,000 square feet. It's not like I have, you know, acres and acres that I'm revitalizing, but just a very, you know, a small piece of land that we were feeding, and nature was just coming to us. Like it was just like this little piece was becoming a magnet where everything was returning to, you know. I think, I don't know, my neighbor used to say, you know, the crows, they come and feed from your yard and then they go and shit on mine. So we just had lots of raccoons, lots of possums, you know, snakes, all kinds of things, you know, all kinds of critters that started to come. And it was awesome, because right now, you know, I have a son, his name is Farmer Rishi, and I've been working with him. I always used to go out and I wanted water features, I wanted trees, you know, like I would just go to the yard and I would lose myself and would forget to eat, forget to drink, you know, like just be out there with the plants. And it was very funny because I really wanted a water feature, and now we have many. But when they were 7, it was a really cute story. I came home one day, and it was my birthday, and they actually dug a little stream, and then put a hose on the top, and it made me a water fountain. But it was so sweet that they understood, you know, that it was very important to me to have that connection with water, soil, land. So right now, what we've done is the whole system is broken. There's a lot of challenges up ahead, but at the micro level, which is what we are, like 5,000 square feet, my goal was like, how do I heal what is right around me? And so we've mulched the land heavily. We mulch every year. That helps with water retention. It fixes the watershed in our area. So we've tried to think of every which way that whatever water lands on our property, I can't solve the city's issues, I can't solve the country's issues, but I can fix just my space. So we've tried to make sure that whatever water lands on our property does not run off, and we're living on top of the hill, so it would easily just drain out. Through like dry ponds and mulching and swales that we've created on the property, we help to keep the water on the property and also infiltrate really deep. We've also created, you know, with the 87 trees that we planted here, so it provides not only food for us year round, and I get anywhere from 3 to 7 fruits per month that come out of the yard. And last year I was doing fruit bowls, just showing all the abundance, because I wanted to show what was possible from an urban standpoint. So if we were all involved in growing agriculture on whatever land we have, how much it would impact us on a larger scale, especially when we start connecting the dots. Neighborhoods could become revitalized if all of us start at a very grassroots to try to heal the land. So I've forgotten the numbers, but I did do a TED Talk many years back, which never found its way on TED. But at that point, we had composted, I want to say 40 tons of green waste. So for many years, it's been like maybe I want to say like 12 to 15 years, no green waste that I produce leaves my property. So I've taken responsibility for composting everything, any of the green waste. So I usually get about, because we eat a lot of vegetables and we grow a lot of fruit, so I get close to about a 5-gallon bucket of green waste per week, or sometimes even more. So I make sure that I compost everything, by either putting them in just straight in the dirt. I have a hungry bin. I have several other different types of composting systems that I work with, along with a lot of lasagna mulching. So we do a ton of lasagna mulching. And our soil now, I remember I told you, my soil was literally cement, like it was cement hard, and I couldn't even break it with a pick. And at this point now I can go maybe up to 2 feet in the ground. It's totally nice, rich, black. We don't have as much of a water bill because we've been working on really reviving, regenerating the suburban lot that we have. So I look at it as it's a very zero waste thing, because I'm not relying on resources to deliver food to me. So it's like, if you do have land use, if you have any kind of patio, If you have any kind of windowsill, is whatever, in whatever way or form, whether it be just a few pots or whether it's an acre or whatever, if we can somehow reestablish, you know, our connection with soil. And I just want to say, I think in these days and times, a lot of us are very educated, and so we're educated and we're going into agriculture, which is a very, very challenging field, especially when you are a small farmer. I can totally relate to Amber and Yemi when they talk about the challenges. It cannot pay your bills. It's a very tough profession, because not only are all of your the water, you know, you're not getting water subsidized. It's not at a farming level. You're paying like city water costs. So there's a lot of challenges in farming. It's backbreaking. It's also challenging from a weather point of view, because a frost can happen at the wrong time, or the rain can come in at the wrong time. And this year, the weather has been swinging like crazy. I don't know about where you guys are at, but it's like
Global
30
warming.
degrees
Absolutely.
up, 30
Yeah.
degrees down, right?
Yeah.
Long winters. It's like, it's really screwing up the whole farming model. You cannot rely on like, okay, you know, this is spring, I plant this, and I can start planting summer. And so, you know, you lose a lot of crops. And it's I've gained so much respect for farmers. And since I started to do it on my own, I guess I'm privileged. I come from a wealth, you know, my background is of wealthy farmers. My grandfather on my mom's side, my grandfather from my dad's side. Actually, my grandfather from my dad's side, they had lands and they worked their own lands. On my mom's side, they were landlords and they used labor. And I can definitely attest to the earlier question that Dominique had talked about, is that there's a lot of abuse when it comes to people who work the land. Like they don't get the respect and the compensation that is needed. And I think that's also related to cheap food. So somehow, you know, I remember originally when I first started farming, and you know, people would question me. They would say, well, how come you're selling your bunch of onions for like $3? And I'm like, hey, I bought the seed, I planted it, I watered it, I cared for it for 3 months, and you want me to sell it to you for 99 cents for like 6 bunches? I'm like, I'm not doing that, you know? So I put in a lot of hard work, time, care, made sure I'm feeding the soil properly, and it's just not the same product, you know? It's very, very different. And mass agriculture, I don't know, am I going off topic, Dominique? Should I like stick more to topic?
No. I mean, you were doing good. You wove in so many different points, but I think the driving point was a local urban point of view, because we talked so much about systems and infrastructure, and for you to hone in on your experience as an individual, I think it's extremely important as people are looking to understand what can they do in terms of localized circularity while also fighting the bigger system. So you were definitely spot on, Manju, and thank you.
Thank you. Because I tend to go on sometimes.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's a passionate, I know, love. It's a passionate panel. We are close to out of time. So what I'm gonna do is ask all of our panelists how do they envision or reimagine the future of agriculture? I want to end on a positive note, and really instill some positivity as we are in a fucked up time, and how we can look towards the future. And that can be from an individual point of view, a community point of view, policy, larger systems. I just want to get sort of a quick sentence or two about how you reimagine the future of agriculture, so that people can take away some potential action steps or some theories and philosophies to marinate on as we come up with solutions during this time. So I will start with Rebecca.
Land trusts that provide 99 to 100-year leases for minimum to those who tend, and that your relationship to that land base gets to maintain through your tending practice, which echoes the native communities of North America that had usufruct. There was no private property. If you tended it, you were that oak tree, and those acorns that dropped from it that was part of your gathering grounds, and every other tribal member understood that. And it was respected without the need for private property. So I think through tending and tending and caring being the thing we value, and protecting that through putting land in trust.
Yeah, thank you. Land trusts are definitely going to be vital for the future of sovereignty. Yemi, how do you re-envision the future of agriculture?
You're muted.
All right. One of the things that I would love to see, again, just speaking about New York City, because this is where I've lived for the last 24 years of my life and I've worked, is for us to have a model of agriculture where we put food where people are, you know? So if you're in the projects, there is like, there's a lot of space, you know, parking lot, ground floor, whether it's apartment buildings, whether it's schools, whether it's hospitals, whether it's places of worship, just to have food where people are. So folks don't have to go out of their way to get access to good food, but also to have a more intimate relationship with food. There's junk food everywhere, right? You don't have to look far to get it. It would be nice to see, and it's really possible. It's just having policy and having people push for it, to just have people growing, to have food growing where people are, and also to have people being paid to tend the land and to grow the food to feed everyone else. That's a future that I'm excited for. There's a little bit of it happening here and there now with developers incorporating urban farming in new buildings, but we need to see that across the board, especially in Black communities, especially in communities that are dealing with like the devastation of all types of food-related illnesses.
Absolutely. Land trust and putting food where people are, specifically in targeted communities. Let's go. Lisa, how about you? Come on, Miss Betty.
I'm mute. Okay, here I am. I'm divesting from capitalism and divesting, from white supremacy and divesting from Chiquita Banana. It's very hard because we've been, basically marketed. All this marketing is being pushed towards us, particularly people of color, but to Americans, to the global world, to eat a certain way, to be a certain way. We need to divest from those ways and really invest in sustainable, small, local economies. Another thing, and I'll try to be quick, addressing land theft. Just what Amber was saying, that she's four generations in Brooklyn. A lot of us are from the Great Migration, and that's the period 1910 to 1970, 80s. And we basically were terrorized, murdered, lynched, and they stole a lot of land. 1910, we had, 15 million acres of land, Black people. Now we only own 1% of that land, 15% versus 1% now. So it's just addressing that, knowing that that was only maybe 1 or 2 generations ago, and that we need to reclaim that theft and address Chiquita Banana directly, address address those entities directly as a way of reparations and addressing land theft as a way of reparations and being closer to the land.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mitigating land theft and community approaches to sovereignty is going to be pivotal in the future. Amber, reimagining.
This is what I do all the time.
I know it is.
1, we need access to all public parks, especially Central Park, which once was Seneca Village, which was owned by African Americans and other immigrants. We need access to all public parks, minimally 1/4 of an acre to grow food. They should give us more than that, but all I'm requesting is 1/4 of an acre. That's it. We need sponsorships from greenhouse companies. We need sponsorships from tool companies. We need sponsorships from farm gear companies. All of that. All of that needs to be sponsored by way of them getting a tax deductible and us getting what we need for free. We need better transitions in farming. Yemi was talking about this, and I've thought about this for so long. We have nonprofits like Kiss the Ground that are totally talking about soil regeneration. We have, like Yemi said, we have farm school. We need to be able to say, okay, you're educated, farm an acre in New York City. If you like doing that, let's find you a place to work across the US, and then let's find you a way to get your own land. We need to have a whole program that takes a farmer from their city environment, if that's where they're coming from, and guiding them across that.
Absolutely. The epitome of a regenerative system and what it needs to fucking look like. Hell yeah. And Manju, you are last but not least, and would definitely love a more individualistic approach to how you see the future of agriculture.
Okay. When we first started our nonprofit or the work that we were doing over here, what we saw was that, of course, I live in the suburbs, so I'm going to relate to it in the suburbs. If each one of us in the suburbs, if we all turned our space into a garden, if we were all doing something similar, like water harvesting and planting trees. Even if all of my neighbors on my street were to plant a few trees, because that's the most simplest thing to do. But if we were all to be growing our own food in our front yards where we have land, utilizing the land for something other than just being ornamental or like a dead landscape to me, an ornamental landscape that provides no food at all to me is a dead landscape. If no bugs, no insects, nothing wants to come over there, it's there's no point for it. But if all of us got to that, I think it would bring us all out. Like you could even have a little system where you say, okay, I'll grow the lemon trees, I'll grow the orange trees, I'll grow bananas. And so you have like this community already forming, and we're using land that we already have for something that's very, very positive, which is like feeding each other. And that would create like a community that would be very strong and very resilient, because we no longer have to rely on outside sources. To me, I hate to say this, but cities feel like little cages where inputs have to come in and inputs have to be taken out. And so when we plan our cities, we cannot plan our cities without a farming circle. Maybe they need to be in circles where there's a city and then there's a land use all around the city, so that we have very localized food systems that are easy to access to the cities. And city folk have an opportunity to be going out and helping, because it's very, very important that each one of us get our hands in the dirt. A while back, maybe I would say 3 years back, we had created a model. So we have a farmer. She owns a half an acre of land on which we had started an urban farming program. It is not available right now. But what the model that we did, what it created was, and this is something all cities can actually put into practice because we did this. We were not only training farmers, teaching them the connection to land, which like you guys said earlier, all farmers are teachers as well. But we were composting anywhere from 300 to 700 pounds of green waste on maybe, I want to say 900 square feet or something, or maybe 1,000 square feet. We were also providing 30 CSA boxes at that time per week. Everything basically close to maybe 95% grown on our property at the farm, or fruit coming from my house, or at that time we were just starting another location as well. But what it was is, it was a space that was composting green waste, gathering the tribe, teaching them how to grow their own food, teaching them the connection to soil and land, teaching them, like turning on lights to an alternative way of living and thinking.
That's beautiful.
And providing food at the same time. So, you know, it was a very, very powerful model that I think any city should implement. Like, all cities should be thinking about all of their empty space. You know, what can I do to compost over there? What can I do to convert green waste right there in the cities? What can I do to teach the people, feed the people, so that they can all start to get that connection? We don't have to be so separate from our food. We don't have to rely on the thing that I totally, you know, want to get away from is like me not knowing where my food comes from.
Yeah.
And we need to make that effort to go out and connect with, you know, if you don't have land, maybe your friend has some land, you know, maybe you can work on a project together and, you know, grow food for each other. And cities definitely need to come in and help. You know, garbage companies don't need to, we don't need a green trash, we don't need a green trash truck coming in and taking out the green waste. If, especially for the suburbs, if a machine came in, you gave it your green waste, it shredded it for you and returned it back to you, and you could lay it down on your land, it would be much more efficient. They don't have to go cart it off to anywhere. They don't have to try to find a landfill anywhere. They can actually use that resource. It's a resource. You can use it right where you are, and you're reducing, you know, you're reducing so much of the carbon footprint that you have. So I think we just need to have a better discussion of like all of the broken watersheds and all the broken systems that we have created.
Yeah.
We have to look at them, we have to analyze them, and we have to see how can we fix it with the minimal amount of energy and right where it is. Like,
yeah, and the resources that are at our disposal. Oftentimes we don't know that we are not aware of those resources. So thank you for that. And before we transition into questions, I want to end on this quote from a book that has been very helpful to me during this pandemic, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, excuse me. And this really quick quote: in the settler mind, land was property, real estate, capital, or natural resources. But to our people, it was everything: identity, the connection to our ancestors, the home of our non-human kinfolk, our pharmacy, our library, the source of all that sustained us. And I think it's a super powerful quote because everything is connected to the land. And as farmers, or as people who are in the agricultural space, we have to remind ourselves that we all in some way are educators, and agriculture is deeply based in indigenous concept. So just thinking about that as we move to the next phase in our journey of revitalization and land sovereignty and food justice. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And I'm gonna hand it over to Whit for questions.
Thank you, Dawn, for moderating. Thank you for this dynamic discussion. We're already seeing calls for a part 2. So we may be in your inboxes a little bit.
Right. There's so much to talk about.
And also, I just want to acknowledge the land that we're currently occupying, Lenape land, and I also want to acknowledge the labor of our ancestors who worked for generations. So our next question, or our first question, is from Kevin Oster, and I think this is directed towards you, Lisa, but anyone, feel free to jump in. He asked, or they asked, how do we ensure these fringe economies remain in the hands of BIPOC communities? AKA, how do we prevent white imperialism from taking over?
That's difficult because now we're hearing, allyship, and that word could be scary to us. I don't know if white allies know that allyship is a scary word. It's a bad word because we think that it's our efforts are going to be co-opted, and even the leadership may change, and certain aspects will be also diminished. Or it won't be as radical as we would like it to be. But I think if you root it in history and focusing on the history of the Great Migration, land theft in Afro-Indigenous communities, I read something even with, in Brooklyn itself. A lot of these main streets that we know, Van Buren, they're all enslavers, from the 1890s. And they held, in bondage 300, 350 people. So even in this space, there are blood and bones in this area that we need to reclaim and that we need to understand. So I think if you delve into the history, white supremacy can't touch history because white supremacy makes shit up. That's the white supremacist logic and delusion. So if you're grounded in your history and your purpose, they can't say trump that and take over the narrative because the narrative is already firm. But you have to make sure you understand the narrative and you're grounded in the language that you're using, and and then you also have identify the role that allies will have in supporting and protecting what you have. So identifying their role and then grounding yourself in the history of the space, and then even the larger history of land theft of Afro-Indigenous people. I say Black Indigenous, I say Afro-Indigenous because it's all in that same realm. And then also land recovery and migration, forced migrations, even throughout the United States and the Caribbean that had people land here. Because what I'm thinking, it only takes a half a generation for a family to lose their connection to the land. My family almost lost their connection to the land. I have my entire family composting, something my grandma did because that's what she did. She's a farmer. But we did not compost until maybe 3 years ago. But my entire family composts, down to my 8-year-old nephew. Got to put it in the compost. So those small things of reclaiming our narrative, composting is a part of my narrative. And I'm reclaiming that, but knowing that that's my narrative. That's not that's not an ally who introduced me to compost or a cool thing I saw somewhere. This is a part of my culture and a part of my history and a part of my narrative, and it's firmly grounded in that.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Yeah.
We have another question, and this is from an anonymous attendee. I'm not in the position to start farming independently yet, like you all. But what are some easy ways for me to start supporting sustainable food systems in my day-to-day?
Does anybody want to take that one? I would say farming in pots, that would be, I would say, like, it's very important for all of us to tend to some plants at least, something that establishes a connection with you. Maybe it could be an aloe vera plant because you don't have enough sunlight. Maybe it could be some oregano or some basil or some thyme if you have some, but creating some kind of a connection is like something that we can do right away. And then I think also reaching out, and I think there's an app called Crop Swap. I don't know if you guys have heard of it or not, but they've been trying for the longest time to launch, and I think part of the issue is there's not enough of us doing anything. And so if there was enough of us doing a little bit of something, we would have something to trade back and forth. But also just supporting, like local farms, and going out for some, I don't know if they have a farm work day. I'm kind of starting that at my farm on Fridays. I can take up to 10 people. We usually will come sign up 10 people, and then they follow somebody else that's been there already, so they're kind of mirror or go through the farm chores or tasks with them, and at the end we sit down and we prep a meal together and we eat lunch together. So it's just something that I'm new that I'm introducing right now, and I've been working on it because it's been kind of a juggle. Funding is always such a huge problem, and so what we started is we started an organic nursery that seemed like a very viable way of making money because people were interested in buying plants. And so we have a subtropical nursery, and also we focus on medicinal herbs and rare native California plants, supporting farmers by buying from them, like seeking them out and buying from them specifically is a great way wherever you're at, and whatever, in a way of like investing in your future, because your future is farmers that understand the connection to the land. Like I am so honored to be here with Amber and Yemi, and when you talk about your connection to the earth, I said only the farmer can understand that. It's because you are, you're not separate. You really understand that connection when you are in the land. So honor your farmers. Soil is gold. Don't value money as much as you value soil. So like we have to change our value system. What is really more important? Is it a big mansion, or is it good food? Is it community, or is it breaking bread together or cooking together? I think we just have to like shift our reality, shift what we value. And once we shift what we value, we don't buy into media and what media asks us to buy into. I think that we can change. We can, we are the power after all. And collectively is when we're really powerful, and we're witnessing that right now. And so we just have to create, more powerful values that are going to help us rise. That's my piece.
Thank you so much, Manju. This has been an amazing discussion, and I'm so sad that we're nearing the end. For those of you who did not have your questions answered, if you want to email us, we will try to get those responses from our panelists offline and directly to you. Our email address is hello@sustainablebk.co. Emily also from our team put in everyone's Instagram handle so you can follow all of our panelists. And panelists, we're already seeing people wanting to donate to you. So Yeah, so if you have any way that they can do that, please post that to your Instagram bios. And we will also distribute donations as they are sent for the panelists. Let's see, I think that I'm going to close out questions right now. There are so many. This is amazing. We definitely, you know what, Dom? We have a part two. We just need to do it.
Agriculture is so important. I mean, fashion was important also, but agriculture is the root of that. So
it's the foundation, and this conversation is, we really do think that it is the crux. It's the origin of liberation for us. You know, rooting ourselves in new ways to engage with agriculture in a liberating way. So I'm going to share just how to support Sustainable Brooklyn again. So these are the ways to support us. We are accepting donations for our own work. We are 2 Black women who have started this organization with no outside funding and very little personal funding. So we appreciate any type of donations you feel like offering. And we also are doing a COVID-19 rent relief fund here in Brooklyn, so that they can stay in their homes during the duration of COVID-19 and figure out other ways to gain income. So that's all for us.
Yeah. And just another quick thank you to Manju, to Rebecca, to Amber, to Lisa, to Yemi. Was that all 5 of you guys? Thank you guys. Thank you guys for your energy.
Thank you for connecting all of us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone who's in attendance, have a great evening or morning, wherever it is where you are. We definitely sincerely appreciate your presence here, and thank you again to all panelists. Have a good day.
One, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Oh, I'm in the dark. Hi, Whit.
Can you stop the recording?
I'm going to stop the recording.